They say trust is the most precious gift a parent can give to a child, but mine became my greatest wound. I'm Eleanor, born in 1949 in Melbourne, Australia. Back in my 69th year, on what was meant to be an ordinary family trip, my son betrayed me in a way that would scar me forever. I felt fear crush me as I sat alone on that roadside bench, abandoned and trembling, but then something inside me hardened into steel. Today, at 76, sitting in my quiet coastal home, I'm finally sharing this because silence has weighed on me too long. If you're listening, drop your city below in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like mine. The trip began as Julian's idea. He said it would be nice for us to take a drive down the coast together, just me, him, and his wife, Claire. I believed him because I wanted to. My late husband, Arthur, always told me, give them the benefit of the doubt, Ellie, and I held on to that principle far longer than I should have. We packed light snacks, music, and even a little blanket in case I got a cold. I climbed into the back seat, grateful for the chance to be part of their lives. The sun was high, the air salty from the bay, and for a while it almost felt like a memory from decades earlier, when Arthur and I would take Julian on Sunday drives to Phillip Island to watch the penguins shuffle home at dusk. I leaned back, breathing in nostalgia, unaware that this trip was not a gift but a stage set for my erasure. Hours slipped by as the city disappeared behind us. Claire sat stiff in the passenger seat, scrolling endlessly on her phone, while Julian spoke about business, property, and plans that no longer included me. I laughed when I could, nodded when I should, though something in his tone chilled me. He spoke of futures as though I were already gone, his words dipped in a casual cruelty he didn't think I'd notice, but I noticed. I always did. We stopped at a roadside cafe for coffee. The place was quiet, a peeling sign over the door, a smell of fried food drifting from the kitchen. I excused myself to use the restroom, and when I returned, the car was gone. At first, I thought they'd only moved it, perhaps to a different spot. I scanned the gravel lot, clutching my bag, but the space where the car had been was empty. My chest tightened, a drumbeat of disbelief. I stepped to the edge of the road, eyes sweeping left and right for the sight of our silver sedan, but there was nothing but the blur of passing vehicles. I waited. 10 minutes, 20, an hour. The cafe owner glanced at me curiously from behind the counter as I sat on a bench outside, the wooden slats cutting into my back. My phone buzzed with a single message from Julian. Stay put. We'll talk later. That was all. No explanation, no assurance. No promise to return. I called his number. It rang once, then went dead. Claire's phone went straight to voicemail. Panic clawed at me, cold and sticky, while shame burned just as fiercely. I was a grown woman, a mother, a grandmother, yet here I was discarded like old furniture at the side of a road. The hours crawled by. I bought a cup of tea just to keep the owner from staring at me like I was loitering. I sipped it slowly, though my throat was dry with fear. As dusk settled, a kind woman, perhaps in her 40s, noticed my trembling hands. She sat beside me, offered a smile, and asked if I was all right. I lied, saying my son had gone to pick up something and would return soon. She touched my arm gently and said, "You don't look like someone who's being cared for." Her words cut deep, echoing truths I tried to deny. Eventually, I called a taxi. When I arrived home, I discovered my keys no longer worked. The locks had been changed. I knocked, banged even, but the house remained dark, silent, and foreign. My own home had been turned against me. Through the frosted glass of the front door, I thought I saw a flicker of movement. Claire's silhouette, pausing before withdrawing. Quickly, they were inside. They had locked me out deliberately. My neighbor, Margaret, found me shivering on the porch hours later. She insisted I sleep on her couch that night, and though I was grateful, humiliation sat heavy on my chest. I felt like a beggar outside the walls of a life I had built with Arthur. Every photo in that house, every piece of furniture, every garden bed we had shaped it together over decades. Now it was theirs, and I was an intruder. The following morning, I returned to find a letter shoved under the door, Julian's handwriting, sprawled across the page. Mom, this is for the best. You're not well. We're arranging things so you'll be looked after properly. Don't fight it. My hands shook as I read. My mind flashed back to his cold tone in the car, the way Claire avoided my eyes, the message telling me to stay put. This wasn't neglect born of laziness or misunderstanding. It was calculated. They wanted me out, erased, declared incapable. My very existence had become inconvenient. I wandered the streets aimlessly that day, walking past familiar parks, shops, and schools where I once waved at Julian as a boy. Every corner of the suburb whispered memories of my son as a child. The scraped knees, the birthday cakes, the whispered prayers when he was sick. I thought of Arthur's voice, warm and steady, telling me we had raised a fine young man. If Arthur could see this now, what would he think? Would he blame me for trusting too much? That night, back on Margaret's couch, I stared at the ceiling, unable to sleep. I listened to the hum of her refrigerator, the ticking clock on her wall, the sound of my own heart breaking in my chest. I realized I wasn't just locked out of my house. I was being locked out of my own life. Days passed in a blur. Margaret urged me to call a lawyer, but I was frozen between disbelief and despair. What kind of mother sues her own son? What kind of mother admits her child wants her erased? Shame silenced me more than fear. Yet each day that passed, I felt myself fading. The absence of my home, my belongings, my routine, it stripped me piece by piece until only raw grief remained. And then, one afternoon, as I sat by Margaret's window watching children kick a ball down the street, a fire stirred in me. A thought, clear and fierce, rose up. They think I am powerless, but I am not. My husband, Arthur, had always been cautious with legal matters. Somewhere, in a locked cabinet at the bank, there were documents he had insisted we keep safe. I suddenly remembered his words years ago when we signed our will. Allie, if anyone ever tries to push you out or control you, this will protect you. At the time, I'd laughed, thinking it was unnecessary. Now, those words thundered in my memory like a lifeline thrown to a drowning soul. So I stood up, straightened my shoulders, and decided that while Julian had left me by the roadside like a discarded suitcase, I would not remain abandoned. The story wasn't over. The fight for my dignity had only begun. The morning I stepped into the solicitor's office, I felt as though I were walking into the very heart of my own reckoning. My hands trembled around the handle of my bag, but my mind was clear. I had carried the weight of Julian's betrayal for weeks, nursing humiliation in silence. But no silence was no longer an option. Margaret had arranged the appointment with Mr. Harrington, an older lawyer with silver hair and sharp eyes that seemed to pierce through the fog of my despair. As I sat down in his tidy office, smelling faintly of leather and dust, he asked me gently, "Mrs. Hartman, tell me everything from the beginning." I began with the trip, the laughter that wasn't laughter, the car ride thick with words about futures that excluded me, the roadside cafe where I was left like a forgotten coat on a hanger. I told him about the message, the locked doors, the letter that insisted I was not well. With every sentence, shame pressed heavier on my chest, but I forced myself to continue. When I finished, my voice was raw, but Mr. Harrington simply leaned back, steepled his fingers, and said, "I've seen this before. It's guardianship abuse." The term hit me like cold water. Abuse. I had always thought that word belonged to others, to people beaten or abandoned in alleys, not to someone like me. Yet that's exactly what it was. Julian's petition to the court to have me declared incapacitated and placed under his guardianship. He wasn't only stealing my home. He was attempting to strip me of myself. Mr. Harrington asked if Arthur had left any documents beyond the standard will. The memory of Arthur's words returned. With force, "This will protect you." I told him about the safety deposit box at the bank, where Arthur had stored papers years ago. Harrington's eyes sharpened. We'll need to see those immediately. The next day, Margaret accompanied me to the bank. My heart pounded as the clerk brought out the small metal box. I opened it with shaking hands, expecting perhaps a few life insurance documents. But inside was Arthur's will, and beside it, a thick folder labeled Hearthstone Legacy Trust. Tears blurred my vision as I read his familiar handwriting on a note. Ellie, if the world ever turns against you, this is your safeguard. The will contained a protective clause Arthur had insisted upon, a provision against coercion, undue influence, and exploitation by any heir. In clear legal language, it declared that should any family member attempt to take control of my assets under false pretenses, they would forfeit their claim. My breath caught in my throat as I realized Arthur had not only loved me, he had foreseen the very betrayal that now threatened to undo me. With Harrington's help, we activated the Hearthstone Legacy Trust. My accounts, properties, and investments were transferred into the trust, with myself as the living trustee and Harrington as. This meant Julian no longer had a direct path to seize anything, no matter what lies he told the court. But Julian did not know this. Not yet. The weeks leading to the hearing were agonizing. Julian's petition painted me as erratic, confused, and prone to dangerous lapses of memory. Claire supplied a sworn statement claiming she'd witnessed me forget basic things, leave the stove on, wander into the garden at night. Lies, all of them, and yet written with such precision they looked like truth. Reading those documents felt like watching my identity dissolve in ink. When the day of the hearing arrived, I wore my best navy coat and held Arthur's will close to my chest. The courtroom felt colder than any winter morning I'd ever known. Julian sat across from me, his face arranged in a mask of calm concern, while Claire clutched his arm, playing the part of a dutiful daughter-in-law. When his lawyer spoke of my deteriorating faculties, Julian lowered his head as though grieving. The performance made my blood boil. When my turn came, Mr. Harrington stood tall, his voice steady and commanding. He presented Arthur's will and the trust documents, reading aloud the protective clause. The courtroom hushed as the words rang clear. Any attempt by an heir to falsely declare incapacitation for personal gain shall result in immediate forfeiture of inheritance. Julian's face twitched, just slightly, but enough for me to see the mask crack. I spoke to, my voice shaky at first, but gaining strength. I told the judge about the trip, about being left by the roadside, about the locks changed on my home. My words weren't polished, but they were real. Your Honor, I said, I may be 70, but I am not broken. My husband trusted me to safeguard what we built together. I will not be erased. The judge's gaze shifted between Julian and me, his expression unreadable. At last, he ruled that the petition was denied, citing Arthur's clause and the trust as evidence of both my competence and my husband's foresight. Julian's face darkened, Claire's lips pressed tight, and in that moment, I felt something return to me that had stolen my dignity weeks earlier. But victory in court didn't erase the wound of betrayal. As I left the building, reporters swarmed, scribbling down words like elder exploitation and guardianship abuse. I ignored them, but inside I carried a storm. Julian wasn't just my son. He was the boy I had once held through fevers, the teenager I'd comforted after heartbreak, the man I cheered for at his wedding. And yet here he was, trying to declare me unfit, all so he could wear the crown of my life's work. In the days that followed, I withdrew into myself. Harrington congratulated me. Margaret baked me a pie, but I could barely taste it. My heart ached each time I looked at family photos. Every smile on Julian's young face was now a reminder of a mother's blind hope. I wondered if I had raised him wrong, if somewhere along the way I had failed to teach him compassion. But then I reminded myself, greed belongs to the greedy. His choices were his own. Still, Harrington warned me, they won't stop here. They'll try another angle. You must be ready. His words unsettled me, but also sharpened my resolve. If Julian wanted a battle, I would not crumble. Arthur had given me tools, and I would wield them. I began working with Harrington and my longtime accountant, Mr. Collins, to restructure my finances. Every asset was protected, every account carefully documented. I signed papers late into the night, my hands sore but my spirit alive. For the first time in weeks, I felt not just like a survivor, but like a strategist. I wasn't waiting for Julian to act, I was preparing. And then, one afternoon, an invitation arrived in the post. Julian and Claire were hosting a family dinner, a celebration of new beginnings. The timing was no coincidence. It came days after the court ruling, as though they hoped to reassert their dominance through spectacle. I held the card in my hands, debating whether to attend. Part of me wanted to burn it. Another part whispered that perhaps this was the stage Arthur had prepared me for. I decided I would go. But this time, I wouldn't walk in as a victim. I would walk in carrying Arthur's legacy, my truth, and the quiet strength of a woman no longer willing to be erased. The night of the dinner, the city air felt heavy, as though even the sky knew what was about to unfold. I stood before my mirror in Margaret's house, fastening a string of pearls Arthur had given me on our 30th anniversary. They weren't the most valuable piece of jewelry I owned, but they carried his presence, his faith in me, and I wanted that strength wrapped around my neck. As I looked at myself, hair brushed smooth, navy dress pressed neatly, I didn't see the broken woman who had been left at a roadside weeks earlier. I saw someone steadied by truth. The car ride to Julian's home was silent, except for the sound of my own heartbeat thudding in my ears. Margaret had insisted on driving me, and I was grateful. Her presence was quiet reassurance, though she would not be entering with me. "You're strong enough now," she said as she parked down the street. "They won't see it coming." Her hand squeezed mine once, firmly, before I stepped out and walked toward the house. Julian's home was lit like a stage, every window glowing warmly, laughter already spilling out into the night. Inside, the long dining table gleamed under the chandelier, crystal glasses catching the light. Relatives I hadn't seen in months were there, cousins, nieces, even a few old friends of Arthur's. The atmosphere buzzed with the kind of false cheer that always precedes revelation. Julian greeted me at the door with a smile so polished it felt like glass. "Mom," he said, kissing my cheek perfunctorily. "I'm glad you came." His hand lingered a second too long, guiding me inside not with affection, but with possession. Claire stood nearby, dressed elegantly, her eyes sharp as glass. I saw it then. This wasn't a celebration. It was a theater, staged to show the family that Julian was in charge, that I was just a guest in what should have been my own life. The meal began with polite chatter. Wine poured generously, platters passed around. Julian rose to his feet halfway through, tapping his glass for attention. "Family," he said, his voice smooth, practiced. "Tonight we celebrate new beginnings. After some difficult weeks, things are now in order. Mom is safe and everything is being managed properly." He gestured toward me like I was a fragile antique vase, something to be admired, but no longer useful. Polite claps echoed around the table. My throat tightened, but I held my silence. Claire then spoke, her words dripping with faux warmth. "It hasn't been easy, but we're doing what's best for Eleanor. She deserves comfort, care, and protection." She smiled at me as though I should thank her for locking me out of my own house. I felt the eyes of the family upon me, their pity, pressing against my skin like 1,000 small needles. I let the silence stretch, then slowly pushed back my chair. My hands didn't tremble as I reached into my bag and pulled out Arthur's will. The room quieted instantly. "Since we're speaking of what's best for me," I began, my voice calm but carrying, "perhaps it's time everyone hears what Arthur thought was best." A hush fell. Julian's smile faltered. I opened the document, unfolding the pages carefully, and began to read. "This clause," I said, tapping the paper, "was written by Arthur himself. It states that should any heir attempt to seize control of my affairs through coercion or false claims. They will be disinherited entirely. Gasps rippled across the table. I continued, steady as the sea. Julian filed a petition to declare me incapable. He left me stranded on a roadside cafe, changed the locks on my home, and spread lies about my mind. He did not act to protect me. He acted to erase me. Julian shot up from his chair, face burning red. Mom, that's not true. You're confused. His voice cracked, desperation seeping through the mask. I met his gaze without blinking. No, Julian, I am not confused. I am not broken, and I will not be erased. My words landed like stones dropped into still water, sending ripples through the room. The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. Eyes turned toward Julian, toward Claire, toward me. Some looked away in shame, others studied there. Wine glasses as though hoping to disappear. The performance Julian had staged crumbled before him, the spotlight shifting, revealing the truth he had tried so hard to bury. I folded the will back into my bag, my voice soft but resolute. Arthur trusted me with this protection, and I have used it. My estate, my accounts, my properties are beyond your reach, Julian. They belong to me, and only me, Claire hissed under her breath, tugging at Julian's sleeve as though to drag him back into his seat. His mouth opened, then closed, words caught in his throat. He sat down heavily, the weight of exposure dragging him lower than any argument ever could. I remained standing a moment longer, letting the truth sink into the silence, then lowered myself gracefully back into my chair. I lifted my glass of water, not wine, never wine, and said to Arthur, to tell the truth, and to the quiet strength we sometimes forget we have until it is all that remains. No one dared to toast with me, but that didn't matter. My glass was raised high enough for Arthur to see, wherever he was. That moment was not about their approval. It was about reclaiming myself. The rest of the evening limped along, conversation forced, laughter hollow. Eventually, I excused myself. No one tried to stop me. Outside, the night air wrapped around me like a bomb. Margaret was waiting in the car, her eyes searching mine. Well, she asked. It's done, I said, sliding into the seat. My body trembled, not with fear. I took everything back. That night, I lay awake in Margaret's guest room, listening to the soft crash of waves in the distance. I thought about Arthur, about the foresight he'd gifted me, about the way he had trusted me to protect not just our home, but my own dignity. I thought, too, about Julian, not with hate, though bitterness lingered, but with sorrow for what greed had turned him into. He had chosen ambition over love, and that choice had cost him everything. Within weeks, I moved to a small coastal home Arthur and I had once dreamed of retiring to. It was simple, whitewashed walls and windows facing the sea, but it was mine. The ocean became my comfort, the rhythm of waves reminding me that life goes on, endlessly renewing. I filled my days with small joys, tending to a garden, listening to jazz records, writing my story in longhand. I was not erased. I was alive, now. When I sit on my porch and watch the gulls wheel overhead, I think of the roadside bench where I once waited, abandoned and humiliated. That bench was the moment I thought my life was ending. But in truth, it was the moment my strength was born. Moral lesson: even when betrayal cuts deepest from those we love most, quiet strength and foresight can restore dignity, protect legacy, and spark a new beginning. If this story touched you, please like the video, subscribe, share with friends, and comment below what lesson you've learned.